D&D for 8 years, ever since college. What got me into D&D is basically I played games online for the most part, Gmod, TF2 back in the day, and then I used to watch a lot of the old YouTubers, Machinima, if you know those guys. Um, and I saw, they were playing this interesting game where people were just in a Skype call, and I saw images, and they were describing these amazing scenes, and they were making this amazing combat, and I was like, whoa, this is fantastic. And I got into Reddit and started playing online for a lot of years until up to last year, where the Abu Dhabi GC community kind of started being an official thing, and people started playing in the tavern. So yeah, D&D to me is an important pillar of my life. It came to me on a personal note, just so you can understand, where I'm coming from, because it's very subjective. D&D to everyone is different. The way I'll describe it to you is the way I see it, and the way I, see DMing could be very different from the way you want to see DMing, right? And that's fine. It's your table. You do what you want. But essentially, D&D was for me a tool to experience things that I would never experience. And when I was a college student trying to figure out myself, it was a good psychological tool for me as well, to not only as an escape, but as a way to connect with other people, to connect with emotions that I never thought I would able to have. So at least that's where I'm coming from. Just to manage your expectations, today's workshop, and it's more of a seminar really, is really going to be me telling you, what's the basics of Dungeons and Dragons, of being a DM, really. What are the tools you need from both a game and rule set perspective? What are the materials you're going to need? And the hardest part of Dungeons and Dragons, which people really don't talk about a lot, is how to manage your table. And how to manage your players on a psychological level, on a communications level, how to keep consistently playing week by week for the next 1 or 2 years. D&D campaigns are long, and they averagely tend to span 2 years. In fact, in my experience, at least, that's if the party doesn't disband halfway through. So yeah, any questions before we start? Anything would love to see more of, or like me to kind of focus on during this workshop? Assume we're all good. Alrighty. So again, our agenda for today, and to be specific, I'd love to introduce you our future DMs, or existing DMs, or maybe just someone just seeing for this interest. What is being a dungeon master? What's your role in the table? What are the resources that you're going to need? Then we will path towards theater of the mind. Now, this is a word you've heard a billion times over, theater of the mind, playing battles in theater of the mind, or mind's eye, or imagining, the current scenarios that you're playing, because it's a vocal game, right? We're just talking about it. And so I wanted to go a little bit about theater of the mind, how to actually practically use it and how to focus on using it, and not dismiss it during your games as one of the best and easiest tools to use when you're running a D&D session. Then we'll talk a little bit about the basics of world building and storytelling, your story, how do you kind of construct it through your scenarios, your world. Very basic stuff. We're not going to go too advanced today. I'm not going to show you a sheet with the settlement and the population number and the system. No, I'm just going to tell you, hey, how are you supposed to do this? And you don't really have to do it that detailed anyways, right? And how you can have fun with it. And then lastly, we'll just do an open table. I'll leave it open. I know a billion people have a billion questions, especially when it comes to DMing. And then I'll show you my favorite tools as well when I DM, and what tools I use to prep quickly, what tools do I use to generate tables, things like that, and save my notes even. Alrighty, perfect. So we start with, what is your role as a dungeon master? You're coming in quite new. There's 4 key factors here. You're the storyteller at the table. The entire game hinges around you, right? Your job is to set the scene, play the NPCs here, and it doesn't have to be too many NPCs. There, you could just say, hey, well, you're in the market square. There's a bunch of people walking. You don't have to really vocalize any of those. Role play those NPCs, role play those monsters, plan the player storylines. It can be as personal as, it could be as small as, the goblin cave if you're playing a module, or it can be as a big storyline that you play throughout different, one-shots or sessions. And yeah, I think that's the main part, like the core of being a DM. If we're talking about what's the general basic pillar of being a DM, is you're the storyteller. The story is told through you. You control it fully, and you set the narration, or sorry, you set the tone of it. And now I know, James, you're kind of shaking your head. I know what you mean. Now, in terms of the players, right? Um, what James is nodding his head about is you don't control the story, but no, you do control the story. What you don't control is the adventure. You will set the story as the DM. You will say, hey, I want them to go to the kingdom. I want them to save the princess. And then I want them to make peace with the king, for example. And then the adventure will never be like that. The players will most likely, go to the kingdom, kill a random NPC, steal from the shop, then go save the princess, maybe save her, kidnap her for ransom for the king. But in either case, that's your adaptation. That's how you adapt and you work with the players, and we'll get to that in a later series. But your main role is to set the initial story. You cannot have a D&D session without having an initial idea of what you want to set. Let's go secondly to the arbiter of the rules, right? This is the one that people get, I think, the most anxious about, right? It's ensuring that the rules are respected, 5e rule set is understood. And I have some very good news here. You don't have to be a robot. You don't have to memorize 100% of the rules. Most people and most DMs, even experienced, don't have that memorized. Nobody has that memorized. You have to know the core basics of combat, which is someone starts their turn, he has an action, he has a bonus action, that's it. And then in terms of how you apply like the skill rolls during the role play, well, it's, oh, he wants to talk to this guy, a persuasion check. And you don't have to do it even very often. You can do it 3 times a session. The rules are not the hard part of D&D. They are very easy. Don't worry about them at all. There are online tools, online references that you can print out and have in the background. The DM screens that you can buy from Wizards of the Coast have shortcuts to all those rule sets. The main hard part about, the arbor of the rules pillar is you as the DM will have to make judgment calls because the rules aren't conclusive. Unfortunately, 5e, and this is not unfortunately, it's fortunately for us, 5e is made in a way where not one table is the same as the other table. The way I attack in James's session, or sorry, like Corinne's session, for example, I haven't used some other names, might be different from the way Sarah's session is run. Sarah might want me to, attack specific body parts, and she has that adjustment, and she has a different ACs methodology. We don't know. D&D is expandable, and you can always kind of run things however you want. The important thing is you're having fun. The players are having fun. You've all agreed on that. Who cares? If you're getting that rule, if the rule set says fireball does 8d6 damage, you and your party decide, you said, hey, well, guys, the 8d6 is a bit too much. I want to lower it to 2d6 or 3d6, whatever, it's just hypothetical. And the party says, well, you know what? That makes sense. Let's do it. Nobody's stopping you. Nobody has the right from outside the table to say, oh, well, no, you're doing this wrong. No, you can do whatever you want. It's your table. As long as you're having fun, the players agreed, we're all having fun. Let's do it, guys. Who cares, right? And say you forgot a rule mid-session. It's not hard to say, guys, well, 1 second. Let's pause a bit. I need to look it up. Go on 5e tools, go on whatever platform you have. All right, how do we do this? This is how it's done in the rule set. Well, makes sense, not make sense. Up to you, right? Again, guys, stop me if something doesn't make sense or you'd like me to re-explain things. It's open for you. In terms of facilitator, all right, let's move there. So when we're talking about the adventure, right? So there's the story that you, as the DM, have set up. They go into the town, they save the princess, they, do diplomacy with the king, whatever. You will have to facilitate that, and you will have to facilitate it thoroughly, especially if it's your first time. Especially if you have first-time players, right? When people are new to D&D, they're not very confident about doing things or going out of like setting the scene for you, or telling you exactly what their characters are doing, right? And you may have seen Critical Role or Court of Swords or whatever, and where the players are a little bit more proactive, and it gives you this. It's deceptive, Because when you start DMing yourself, you see, oh, well, wait, I have to do everything here. Well, yes, for the most part, you control that scene, and you'll have to set it up proactively. Every time you will hear the table, okay, we'll do that, and then the table's going to go quiet and you're going to have to forcefully come in, right? So it's your role to facilitate them from one scene to the other, one scene to the other. If you're lucky enough to have that one player, or perhaps you grow as a party, you get to the point where, yeah, people are facilitating themselves and they don't really need you to hold their hand, you can then not be a facilitator, more of an enabler, where you're just kind of helping them with the scene and drawing it out a little bit. But for the most part, the core pillar here, as in your role, is take them from one scene, describe that scene, what's going on, who to talk to. Sometimes you'll have to give them a bit of a nudge, like, oh, that guard is looking at you weird. He comes up to you and with a very angry look, draw their attention, right? So you control that, and sometimes you'll have to control the pacing as well, like, all right, you see the players are having fun in the tavern and they're discussing things for the last hour, and cool, you're having that. Or a better example is they're shopping. Oh yeah, players love to shop, use their gold, and they're going to be shopping there for hours if you let them, right? Whether it's shopping, whether it's talking, planning is one of those things as well. When they decide, hey, let's develop a plan to do the heist or kill the boss, and they just sit there for like 3 hours planning shit that they're not even gonna apply in the game anytime soon. You as a DM have to then step in, say, guys, I understand, you're having fun with this, but we need to move the session along. You have 4 hours to play. Averagely, your D&D session is going to be 4 to 3 hours, right? And so you have to make sure you're pacing the scenes one by one. Don't be too strict. Let them have their fun. Let them enjoy. But if you feel like, okay, this is getting prolonged, or one player is taking a bit too much time, you can always say, hey, Ahmed, Fatima, I know you guys are having fun, but I'd love to move to Malik and Kieran. That's totally fine. At the end of the day, everybody wants to have that scene. Everybody wants to have their limelight. And you want to make sure that everyone's having fun, and you want to make sure that you're progressing as well, right? And lastly, and this is what people really don't expect, this is the one that hits you in the face a lot, is you're the daddy. You're the daddy of the group. Don't let anybody bullshit you. You're the daddy of the group. You're the guy or the girl that's coming in to this table, and these are your children. The players are your children. They are delinquent children who have been given very toys of mass destruction, and you have to be their daddy. And if anyone tells you otherwise, bring them to me, because no, you have to retain a healthy and fun table, and this has to be done from the start. Understand that D&D is one of the most difficult games to set up from the beginning, because you're talking about averagely 4 or 5 different people coming in a table and describing an imaginary scene, and everyone has something they want to do. Everyone has an ego, right? I have an ego. Me as Ahmed, I want to be the guy with a massive sword, and I want to kill the bad guys. And then, Malik wants to do something else, or Stephen wants to do something else. And so you as the DM are going to be put into this position because you're the one with power, right? You're the one controlling the story. You're the one controlling the adventure. You're the one arbitrating the rules to make it healthy. Make it like, guys, how do we compromise? Let's pause the table for a bit. How do we compromise between these two characters? Because if you don't do that, then, well, D&D tables and parties can get toxic quick and fast. Again, 4 different egos. There's nothing. I'm not coming here because I'm getting paid. No, I'm coming here for fun. I want to have my fun. And most of the times you'll have people who, aren't very good at communicating, and people who, it's very difficult for them to empathize with the others, or see it from others' points of view. And so it turns into stepping contest. Everybody's just kind of measuring themselves and saying, no, I'm the strongest. I got a sword of +1 great sword. I'm going to kill your character if you do this, if you don't do what I tell them to. So you have to manage everyone's needs. And it doesn't have to be stressful, right? It could just be as easy as open communication. Like, most DMs are scared of pausing the game. No, pause the game for a second and say, hey guys, what do we need to do here? How do we compromise? Manage their needs, manage their expectations, manage your own needs as the DM. You as a DM may not like where the story's going on. You out there, they killed every NPC you brought to them. Well, that, I don't know. For me as Ahmed, I manage it very clearly. At the session 0. Session 0s are amazing, and we'll talk about them later, but I tell my players very clearly, I cannot run a evil campaign. I can't. I just don't like it. I don't feel like I'm inaugurating the story. I don't feel immersed. I like to have the anti-hero effect where the party's not the best, candy cotton guys, but they're not the evil guys. They're not going out there robbing and stealing for the heck of it. Because again, remember, you're putting kids with weapons of mass destruction. These guys can go into towns at level 5 and just wreak havoc. And trust me, most of the time, if you throw like a lot of guards at them, they'll find a way to kill all the guards. It's not gonna work, and it's gonna ruin your story. So it's a loss. So you need to communicate what you need, and you need to understand what your players need to run a very healthy party. Mental health is a very big part of Dungeons and Dragons, and if done right, and if done especially with a group of friends, and where you're consistently communicating, consistently meeting each other's needs, trust me, it's going to be the most magical time of the week you will have. You will be excited at the end of every session to start the next session. It's amazing. Compromising and resolving conflicts. All right, sorry, I forgot about this. So resolving conflicts are when those egos start to conflict each other, right? When we have Sarah and Lena saying, well, Sarah wants the loot and Lena wants that same piece, and then they start fighting, and then it's like, well, again, PvP breaks out. And by what I mean by PvP is characters starting to attack each other. Characters start rolling against each other. Some people say, well, this is good for drama. But no, it's not. I will tell you why. The fallacy is that the conflict inside of a party is good for drama, but the conflict's not happening between the characters, and it's not happening for the sake of drama. The conflict is happening between two egos hitting each other. And so Sarah wants to have her way, but Lena also wants to have her way. And there's no win-win here. There's only loss. Because if Lena wins, well, Lena gets the item, she's happy, but Sarah isn't happy. But if Sarah wins, same thing. So someone's not going to be happy, and this is going to spread out through the rest of your game. The rest of your adventure is going to be this versus thing where I want this piece of loot. No, I want it. I'm going to steal it before she sees it. And then this toxicity starts to build. So you need to be very upfront about resolving all your conflicts, making sure that everything's addressed above table, making sure that people are feeling safe. When I get that pack of gold for finishing the quest, I feel safe. I feel actually I want to give it to my party because they've been so nice to me, right? And it's just beautiful to see that. All right. I think that kind of covers it for the basics of your role. I know that, again, this is just the simple basics. If I could talk about D&D all day, trust me, I would. Like there's a billion and one things to discuss, but I'm going to try and keep it as butter as possible, as zibda yani. And if you have any questions, please go for it. I don't know if you can unmute yourself because I sometimes can't see the raised hands. Just shout it out and just say, I just got a question. Alrighty. So we'll go to theater of the mind, the strongest tool. This is the basic and most important tool you have in Dungeons and Dragons. People will harass you at the beginning of starting to play the game with knowing the rules, knowing the character sheets, getting a piece of dice, getting these cool maps, having a cool miniature, having a cool equipment, even your language, right? None of that matters. None of that matters. The essence of Dungeons and Dragons is theater of the mind. It's your imagination, your ability to really close your eyes, talk, and actually imagine the scene that you're talking about. Whether it's you're sitting on a computer desk with 3 screens presenting to a workshop, or are you in the fairy Everglades of Mount Elmore, whatever it is, build that ability in your head to really be able to live it, to breathe it, to smell it, to hear it. And once you're able to build that ability, build the ability to communicate it. And it comes naturally. They come together, right? We're talking through using language, right? I think there's 2 birds flying in the sky. They're quacking in the air. They're making this loud, audible noise. The onion smell pierces your nose as you walk into this kitchen. And when you say these words, I think maybe there is one, you're reducing the stress on yourself because nobody's expecting you to have this prepared. Nobody, right? You're using your imagination. There's a billion and one things that could be in a kitchen. Just use 2. To draw me a scene, draw me a flavor of the tone, and try to imagine it in your head what does this look like? Once you are able to do this, you are able to easily go through D&D like it's nothing. It will all come naturally. Whether it's a goblin's attack, whether it's the cutscene that the boss is talking to the players, or whatever you want to say, right? And the three keys of theater of the mind is using your descriptive language. So make sure when you're describing a scene, you're not just saying you walk into the hallway. If you say that, then what are you doing is you're just giving a shortcut. Try to add a little bit more to it. Every time you go into a new scene, if you have the time, if you feel like it can be a bit interesting, say you walk into this hallway, you smell a very funky, I don't know, odor coming from the next door, or something in the ceiling, or the mildew, or whatever. There's fungus, there's mushrooms. Sorry, my imagination is a bit drawn out right now. But yeah, something like that. You hear the audible noise of patrons in the tavern shouting in the second floor. You taste the wine, you taste the grape juice, whatever, right? Give it a little bit of a taste to that scene, and you will be able to slowly build it up in the mind. And it's always like the difference between going, I walk into that hallway, and I walk into that hallway and you hear something going on is infinitely more interesting. Infinitely more interesting. Because when it's I walk into a hallway, I just draw a blank, and then what's the next? Okay, I walk into the hallway. After that, what? And then if you tell me, hey, well, there's interesting things in this hallway, I'm now starting, okay, let's slow down a bit. There's interesting things in this hallway. I'm starting to imagine it as the player. Okay, this is interesting. Well, what's going on over here? What's going on over there? Maybe, hey, I go to talk to the other players about something interesting, or we investigate the smell, or we investigate the sound, and it has nothing to do with your game, maybe, and it's just another interesting thing that happens in your session. Encourage your players to imagine, right? Allow for their contributions. And this is something that I think is a bit difficult for beginner parties. But I put it here just to see, and this is honestly a test for myself as well, because I'm trying to get better at it personally. Even after 8 years, I'm not very good at this. Allow your players to add things to the scene, right? Maybe their characters wanted to do something in that scene. Hey, he wants to go to the tavern, and you initially didn't have any ideas for a bounty hunter or whatever, right? He says, hey, I want to look at the most mean guy in this tap room. And you don't have anyone. Well, what if there was? You see a disgruntled orc. He has a chipped tooth. He sits in the corner and kind of like grugs and just tops down a mug of ale. He contributed to that scene, right? You had nothing prepared there, but you just kind of used what he brought you, and you developed this interesting narrative in this very otherwise simple and dull tap room. Pacing and focus, right? We go back towards you're the storyteller, or you're the arbiter of the story, right? Take your time describing the scene. Don't feel pressured to finish as quickly as possible. Make sure the players will most often, even the newest players, will most often have that respect for you when you're talking, and nobody will usually talk above you or in front of you. If they do, that needs to be communicated, but otherwise take your time. Say as slowly as possible if you want. If you want to draw that drama, do as much as you want, man. It's on you. You want to draw that key focus. You want the boss to give his monologue. Guys, I know you want to do some things, but I want to draw out this scene. And the boss, he does this and he does that and he says this and he says that. So you don't have the obvious, well, while he's talking, I want to shoot him with a bow. That will happen more often than not, right? Take your time. It's your story. It's your adventure as a party. Make sure that the things you are describing are as clear as possible to the person that you're describing it to. Don't be pressured by time. Don't be pressured by the people in front of you. Have fun with it. Any questions? All right. So now we've discussed like what is the core pillars of D&D now. So you have theater of the mind and you have kind of your main pillars, right? You're the storyteller, you're the group handler, whatever. What are the main resources that we need to look at for you to start being proficient at Dungeons and Dragons, right? You need to again, you don't need to know the rules. The books are 300 pages long, man. I to get through one of those, it'll take you a week or so, and that's if you have the time. Don't worry about that. Get the book and read the relevant parts, right? You have 3 core rule books. You have the player's handbook, and even the new versions. They will be the same rule books, just updated content, right? You have the player's handbook, which is still important for you as the DM because it has the equipment, the classes. You need to understand the classes, right? Your players are going to play, so you can help them out. You can develop the game for them, develop magic items for them. It will also have additional rules on economy, downtime, vehicles, right? It's a very interesting read. You have the Dungeon Master's Guide. Now, this book is scary. It's, I think, next to the Monsters Manual, it's the second largest book they have. And it's scary because it goes into details quick. And this thing goes into techniques about building maps super quick if you flip through it. And how do you build a loot table. And you just don't understand any of this yet. Like, I'm still getting into the meat and butter of making my sessions, and we'll go into that quick. However, the Monsters Manual does have some very useful resources in terms of magic items you can implement to your games, some example NPCs, example madnesses, example optional rules that you can use as well. It has some maps. I'm pretty sure it has some maps, but maybe another book. So it's a very optional book. I honestly, DMG or Dungeon Master's Guide is not a book I would suggest you to read cover to cover from the first go. I don't think it will do you the justice, like it won't give you the essence of what running a session actually looks like. And lastly is the Monster Manual. Now, this is the biggest book that you will have. It's the heaviest. I've definitely been beaten over the head with this thing. It's heavy as hell. And it's basically just a bibliography or a reference to all the monsters in the game. You don't have to read it cover by cover. It's just all the monsters in the game, from griffins to dragons to oozes, and it's a heavy book because there's a lot of monsters and there's more supplements that add to that. So my suggestion for you guys as dungeon masters, as future dungeon masters, if your sessions are coming up and you have campaigns planned, look at the books, get the books, go through them very quickly, look at what you need, save notes here and there. Whatever you need, right? Because we want to have that quick reference, but mostly it's just to understand and help out your players as well, especially if they're new. If you do have time, I would highly suggest reading through a player's handbook, cover to cover. Read through the monsters manual, right? The monsters are not just character sheets. The monster manual also includes lore. When you are able to understand how goblins work in that monsters manual, you are able to play them in a combat scenario better. Did you know that goblins will always focus the weakest looking target, for example? They don't focus the guy that's big and bulky and in the front. And if you read the book, you'll know that, right? And so I got that piece from the monsters manual. And now what do my goblins do? Well, they're a bit sneakier. They'll send 2 to 3 goblins to lure out the big bulky tank paladin, and then they'll go and stabby the cleric at the back. And it honestly adds for a lot of fun because now, hey, you're not just throwing pillows at your players for them to just shoot down and it just becomes a boring combat with no use, right? You're doing something interesting. You're allowing them an opportunity that, for example, Baldur's Gate, Dr. Zainab, if you play it, it allows you this opportunity of strategizing your combat and actually placing your characters here and casting specific spells for specific purposes, right? You need to actually think during the combat. It's not just, I move, I attack, okay, thank you. And then I'm on my phone for the next 5 minutes until it's my session again, right? The more interesting the monsters are, the more interested you will be as the DM. And you're going to be able to imagine different scenarios, imagine different bosses with different abilities, and you're going to be able to really, really, really make combat interesting by adding that lore to your game. Maybe the players find out a little bit about, hey, why do goblins do this? And maybe there's a whole campaign that you start a campaign, well, goblins, whatever. Again, just an example, right? There's a billion different monsters that can use, what are they, the mushroom people called? Bullywugs are the frog people. Bullywugs are a very good example. I'm using them recently. They have an entire lore to their race. They have tribes and things, and all that's written in the Monsters Manual, for example. Alrighty, so that's for the core rule books, and those are your most important rule books. That's what you need to start with if you want to get into Dungeons and Dragons in general, even as a player. You need to have a basic understanding, not a very advanced. If you have the time and you really, really want to get into it, I suggest read it from cover to cover. It'll give you amazing ideas and insights. You then have the official supplements. Now, you've probably seen these. Xanathar's Guide, Monsters of the, whatever, Sword Coast Adventures Guide. There's 10, 20 different books right now. Those 3 core rule books are the most important ones. The rest are just supplements. Look at them as DLCs to the game. They are nothing more than that. You don't have to add them if you don't want to. There's 40 different races because of these supplements, and it can be confusing to new tables, right? And so you don't have to if you don't want to. You can read them one by one, add them one by one. It's up to you. If you really, really want to add everything, cool, man. Go for it. Just make sure that you're referencing which book this is from, so you can always have it in the back of the mind if, hey, you want to double check, wait, does this spell actually do this? So you always have that reference. That's all I suggest. There's a lot of nice supplements, a lot of neat things in these books, and I could go on a whole 3-hour workshop with you guys about each and every one of them. Xanathar's Guide to Everything has a whole downtime system, which we can talk about, and how you can implement downtime in your games. So these are, again, supplements, DLCs. Add them whenever you feel comfortable. And it goes, again, the new updates. Don't feel pressured to wait till September so the new update comes and then you can read that. No. That one is coming when it comes. And when it does, you can slowly start to implement it whenever you feel like it. D&D's, you can, it's not a race, it's a marathon. You can start whenever, do whatever. The table is really yours, right? And then you have official modules. So you've seen these stories, whatever, Dragonlance, Curse of Strahd, Tyranny of Dragons. These are pre-built campaigns that you can take and actually run. They will include the storyline, the NPCs, the maps, the monster sheets, the treasures, the loot, everything. The only thing that you will need to use here, the only thing that you'll need to adapt is if you want to prepare the maps, you'll actually need to print them or whatever, and then figure out how you want to roleplay the NPCs. I highly suggest starting with an official module and we can get into talk about what's the best module to start with at a later time. Definitely, there's a lot of good ones. Curse of Strahd was the first module I finished, one of the best modules till today, and they provide you with a core understanding, the core resources you need to run a successful campaign. And this will help you at the beginning to build up all the tools we've discussed before. So you don't really need to focus on, well, how do I make this map, or how do I make this monster encounter, and where does it go? No, it will give you that. You need to focus on, how do I run my session? How do I run my party? How do I manage my theater of the mind and communicate things? And these are the most difficult things, as we've discussed. So again, highly suggested you start with a module. They're always available. If you go down below, I put, list of the 2 resources I know. I know there's like a billion. You can torrent them if you like. As a college student back in the day, I used to be very poor. I didn't have a lot of money, and especially not money to spend on books online. So back then we had torrents, Remus, a website called Remus that had, all the free PDFs. And I'm very thankful for people like this, And today we have 5e Tools, which is a website you can, copy paste that link or Google it, and it has all the PDFs available for you online. You can torrent it, download it. If you have the money and resources, you can definitely buy them on D&D Beyond. It's highly, highly recommended. D&D Beyond is an amazing website. You can have your character sheets on there, import your monster sheet information. But if you just need the basics, you just need to look at things real quick, you don't have that budget, you don't need to buy anything for D&D. All you need to bring is your imagination, and your energy. That's it. You can sit down in Starbucks, for God's sake, and play your session and have the funnest time of your life. Alrighty. I think that's it for this. All right. So I think I should have made section dividers, but either way. Next section. For running your story, right? Storytelling and world building. I'll go over the very basics of this, and I'll make it relevant to modules, and if you want to do your homebrew. When I say homebrew, guys, in case you don't know what homebrew is a term used, I don't know if it's used outside of TTRPGs, but generally it means something that you've created or brewed in your own table, in your own home, right? It's like a custom rule you've developed, or a custom campaign. If I decided, hey, well, I want daggers to start doing 2d8 damage, that's a homebrew rule by Ahmed. Is it a good rule? No, not really. Daggers should not do 2d8 damage. If you want to start making a custom campaign, right? Again, homebrew campaign, because you've brewed it at your own home. So that's we'll go over the two and how we can impact or kind of go through these main things in both ways, right? So when we're talking about your story, let's go over what's the main two elements. It's the setting. Where is your story based? Is it sci-fi world? And if you're playing D&D, it's mostly a fantasy world. And fantasy worlds come in a variety of ways. You can play Faerun, that's the pre-built world that Wizard of the Coast provides you. Barovia, if you're playing Curse of Strahd. I'm currently running a Nordic setting called Svealand in my weekly campaigns. You can run a campaign where, like Humblewood, where it's all animals and there's no actual humans, and those are pretty cute. I'll tell you that. What world do you want to run? If you're doing a pre-built campaign, or sorry, a module, for a better word, well, how do you want to run this world? Or like they'll give you options. There's no campaign or setting that they will provide you 100% that has everything. You will have to add to it, and you will have to adapt it to your needs. So, for example, you can first start by getting a map. You can Google it. Like this map right here, I just Googled online. You can find it on Incarnate, for example. Okay, this is an interesting map. What does the geography look like? There's a forest in the middle. The environment is a bit temperate. At the bottom, it's a bit harsh. The sandy desert, it's very hot. The mountains, whatever, right? What is the cultures and societies in your map? Are they a bunch of humans? Are they a bunch of orcs? Are they tribalists? Are they religious? What is the world kind of based on? It could be as simple as, I don't know. It's an adventuring world, I saw it in Goblin Slayer anime. It was pretty fun. So there's adventurous guilds here and there, and cool, man. I'd be excited to play in that world, honestly. Now that it's an awesome idea. Trademark, and it's mine now. But yeah, it could be anything. Just make it up. You want it to be Abu Dhabi, fantasy Abu Dhabi? Go for it. Benyas, and then there's Benyas village, and then Sharjah city. It could be anything. It's your world, right? And if you want to take a pre-built map, go for it. And then you can say, hey, well, in the Pantheon Desert, well, these guys believe in the Greek gods, and the Anka Plains, they believe in the, I don't know, Christian god, whatever, right? What is the history of your world? This one is it's not very important. Why I say it's not very important is, yes, your world should have history. It should have, like, how did this world come to be? What has happened in the past few years? But it's very difficult. It's one of the more difficult parts to try and figure things out. And it's actually, I find, a better way to do as you're playing. So as you're starting to figure out your story, and hey, well, Steven and Lena have made characters that believe in this pantheon of gods, whatever. Hey, well, you will start to think of ideas now, right? And then you can start to develop the story or the history of the world as you go. Perhaps there was, their god was this and that, and then he destroyed the Pantheon Desert, which was previously a forest. It's very optional. There's no right way to do that history or even the world itself. There's no right way to do it. It's up to you, right? This is, again, my point of view. I'm biased. I'm subjective to my experience, but experience it as you will. The most important thing is, are you convinced, you, as the DM, are you convinced with your world? Can you see it in your theater of mind, right? I want to walk into the Witchbane Woods. This is not my map. I have no idea where this map is about, right? The Witchbane Woods. I'm walking in it. I'm going to this village called Oredok. It's a fishing village. It's mostly, let's say, a population of Tritons and humans. They kind of get by. They have a bunch of huntsmen that kind of sit in the outskirts. Maybe it's palisaded, maybe the woods are dangerous. Simple stuff. Start one area at a time, maybe, if you want. Up to you. Who are the key figures? We're talking about history. You can generate this online. King Alderach of the Anka Plains. So they know, they'll definitely ask you, who's the king of this town? Who's the leader? I want to talk to the leader, because they always think, they're that important players. And then religion. So this is one that is an important aspect of D&D. Why is religion an important aspect of D&D? Why do you see it often? D&D has 3 divine casters and many subclass casters. So when I say casters, so you have spellcasters in D&D classes, right? Of the 12 or 14 classes. Some of them are arcane casters, so they cast magic based on their knowledge, or, arcane casters are weird. They're like, it's based on knowledge or the elements or whatever. You have nature casters, which are I cast it through nature. These are mostly druids and rangers. They cast nature, plant growth, plant teleportation, whatever, right? And then you'll have divine casters. And divine casters cast their spells based on their relationships with their gods. Clerics cast it legit based on their relationship with their god. If their god doesn't like them, he doesn't offer them the spells at all. Like they can't cast it. And paladins do it based on their oaths. If they are an oath of devotion, they are devoted to being good. And that oath instills their power. And you can write it however you want. Maybe clerics in your world don't do that. Up to you. At least for me, I run it based on that. And that's why religion is important, because religion is how they're getting their powers. And religion is how the people are kind of worshiping and how the people are communicating, what brings the cultures of the settlement together, right? So it's a very interesting and important tool. I will have one disclaimer. Try your best not to bring real life religions into it. So make it as fantasy as possible. Because when you start bringing Christianity, Judaism, things start getting a little bit too real, and it can get very offensive for some people. So go Greek mythology, man. It's so fun. Play with Zeus and the gods. You become Zeus, man. You become Zeus. And then you tell them what Zeus does. Odin. I'm playing Odin right now. So I will play Odin. I like to it. So try to be as fantasy as possible. Give them domains. You can use the ones. There's already a good list in the player's handbook and some of the campaign modules. There's already good lists for you to kind of select what the religion is, how they worship it, and what they do in it specifically. Now, if nobody has any questions about the world, again, very broad topic. I know I kind of went very quickly about it. I'm trying to focus on the key important things I'd love to share with you guys. So please stop me if you have any questions about it. But if we're going to move down to the story. So now I have the world set. Now, I have this interesting kingdom with Anka Plains again, the Pantheon Desert. All right, I have the world. I have some interesting NPCs. Why we do it this way is because it makes the story writing easier, right? Now, if I have the world, now I can start thinking what's happening in this world. So I have the Pantheon Desert and the Anka Plains. All right, so where do I want to stop the players, right? What's the main plot? There's two ways to go about main plots. One way is to write a main plot at the beginning. One plot you want them to go through, and it's difficult to do that at first because you don't know what the party and the story really looks like. But some people can do that, and some people even come into the game knowing exactly what they want to do, exactly who the bad guy is, and if you know that, cool, man, go for it. And the other way is don't write the main story. If you really want to do a homebrew, just let the players write some backstories, and then as you go, maybe, hey, do it. They start in Oradok and there's some quests there. Then they want to move to the Wanderer's Lake, some quests there. Oh, all of a sudden you have this idea. Maybe the Pantheon Desert Kingdom, whatever, Severath is invading. And that's a storyline, that's a main plot, right? And so the main plot and the player backstories are not, they're not separate. They're one entity, really. Even if you've written a main plot to begin with, you can always bring the player backstories in. Player backstories are very important to your game. It is how the player connects his character and immerses himself into your campaign. If the player is playing a random nobody that's just dropped into your world like an MMORPG, then he will play your game like he's just dropped into an MMORPG, walking up to every NPC, grabbing their gold, killing them if they don't talk to him nicely. But if you say, hey, well, your mother lives in Oradok, your father also, your sister's quite sick, actually. You are entering a new level of immersiveness. Now this guy thinks, oh, shit, I can't just kill this guy. I actually really need to help them out. Oh, I'll become a murderer, and then my family's going to pay the price if I run away, right? You immerse that player and give him reasons to really be a part of this community. And so try your best to work with your players. Let them write an initial backstory and then see how you can insert it. Or let them write the story and then build your main plot off it, whatever you want, right? Even if you're running a module, for example. Sorry, I think I skipped over the modules part in the world. But the modules part in the world, right? The module will give you exactly the geography and the environment, the map, the culture, the history, the key. It will give you everything in terms of the world. So there's not a lot to do, except if you want to add, and that's completely fine. People actually most of the time do add to modules, and they add little dungeons here and there if they like it. Why not? It's fun. But in a module, you'll already have the main plot figured out. So how do I add player backstories to this? Well, maybe they pass by a couple of towns or settlements. Maybe I give them the names of the main, settlements or cities or towns, and then they say, "Hey, you're from this village, and this village is known for this. How about you give me a what happened to your parents?" You ask them the question, "What happened to your parents?" You give them a survey, short answer survey. What about your parents? What happened to this? What happened to your sister? What happened to your siblings? What have you done? And again, it's stupid questions, right? But these questions will build that story for you and immerse them. So when they're moving along in the main plot, maybe they don't start there. Maybe they start in a tavern in some god knows where, but they're starting to move to that town. And then holy shit, I'm actually a part of this. This is my people. And then they start to be encouraged passively to play in your game, right? And you're starting to encourage yourself because they're excited, right? So excitement really doesn't work. It's a cyclical thing, right? And I should have said that before. Again, a billion thoughts when it comes to DMing. One of your responsibilities as DM, yes, is to tell the story and pace the story, but it is actually the player's job to build the hype and build the energy. And that's it's a funny part about D&D. You can do whatever the hell you want to do, but there's no way to make your campaign interesting if your players are not interested. You can have the most boring session in a bar, in a tavern, in the town square with a bunch of fish people, and if your players are interesting and excited and hyped and they're just like smiling and laughing and joking around, you're gonna have a fun time. You're gonna have a fun time, and you can't create that as a DM. You cannot superficially. You can describe the scene as much as you want, but you need to communicate to your party. Like it is their responsibility to come to the session, bring their energy. Is if they're excited, you're excited, and because you're excited, you're creating a better story. You're making it a better scene. You're role playing better, and because you're doing that, they're role playing better. They're more excited. So it's a cycle. It's a cycle, but it needs to start from you as a kind of an igniter. They need to light the fire, right? So the player backstories kind of go into that. And again, sorry if I get a little bit confusing. Again, lots of points, right? And the last part of the story is usually the subplots, right? So now we figured out, hey, well, the main story is this. The players have written their backstory. So I have everything kind of figured out in notes. Let's make some subplots. Let's make some interesting. And you could do this during the campaign, like week 2, week 3, week 4, whatever you want. Or you can like have a bunch of like, I want a monster hunt. I want them to hunt a kraken when they're at sea trying to go to Gondor or whatever, right? It's up to you. You can write a subplot here and there. Interesting side quest, right? Every RPG needs to have a side quest. Like even if the players ignore it, you need to have a side quest. It's not an RPG if you give me one train and one destination. You gotta have those distractions and make it fun because real life is that way. I woke up to have breakfast. Oh well, I saw a delivery from Amazon and then I started 30 minutes trying to configure it. It's the fun and it's the dynamism of that imagination, of that imaginative play. You can always drop subplots whenever and you can build them up as you go. So take your time, enjoy it. It's your creative right to do whatever you want. Alrighty. So I think last part of this, right, is preparing for your session. There's a lot. Don't worry, we'll go over them one by one. There are key factors to preparing for the session. Some of them are very optional. I just put them here and I put them in parentheses optional so you don't have to worry too much about them. But I just wanted to at least inform you because of course you've seen them. You've come to the tavern, you've gone back to games, and you've seen people use them here and there. And you've thought maybe, I need to do this, but you don't. So the most important thing when you are coming to the session is to have how am I going to start my session? What's the opening scene? Figure that out. Have that figured out every session. And once you have that figured out, starting the session won't be so hard. Bullet point. One bullet point. We left off last week in the tavern, so they're gonna start at the tavern this week. At least to remind yourself, they're gonna start at the tavern this week with talking to this NPC. Simple bullet point. Start that scene, and if you can build the tone of the scene, and this is, I think, a bit advanced, but it's really nice. And a bit advanced means like some sessions you're just not in the mood. Let's be honest. Some sessions your creative buds are not activated yet. You need to play a bit to warm up your brain. Fine, man. It's a game. It's fine. But if you can, and you say, hey, well, this scene's gonna be a bit of this session's gonna be a bit of a dynamic or a stressful one. How do I build that starting scene to be a bit stressful? How can I add a little bit of stress? Last session, you guys left off in the tavern talking to who knows who. This session, Jim, you realize at the corner of your eye, you see a shadowy figure staring at your party from the window. And immediately in the starting scene, you've set a tone, right? And that tone plays out for the rest of the session. The starting scene is one of the most kind of, it's the ignition to the hype, right? It's the ignition. It's what you give your players to the hype, and it's the most important one. Don't give it too much pressure. It's not that big, but it's a nice kind of key factor for preparing for your session. Next is, what locations am I going to have today? The most important thing is have just a notepad with bullet points. The Broken Tooth Tavern. This is the innkeeper. Town Square, etc. It can be theater of the mind. You don't need a map. Don't need a portrait. Don't need any art. Don't need anything. Just describe it. What does it look like? Who am I seeing? And when we move into that, it's fun. Hey, I have a table. Tables are and lists are for generally for like shops. The tavern. You don't have to do it. It's very optional, but it's best practice. Like it's one of the better things to do if you have the time. Where it's like, oh well, for each shop have a table, and you can generate these ChatGPT or whatever of like the items available, and you could tell it to the players. But you can make that up as you go. Even you don't really need to have it prepared. Most important thing is have the description of what they're seeing, where they're going ready. So you're not surprised, right? Especially at the beginning when maybe you're not as adept at the communication yet, right? Or the narrative communication yet. Have it written down. There is a fallacy that says don't over, and some people like it's a 50-50. Some people will tell you, oh, don't over prepare, don't stress out for D&D. And some people will tell you, no, stress out for D&D. Both sides are right. So you shouldn't stress out for D&D. But you should thoroughly prepare. And why should you thoroughly prepare is because the more you have prepared, the more you can focus on having fun. Your brain, like think of it as capacity, right? Your brain is working 100% on generating things from scratch. Like even when you're like 5 years in or 3 years in and you're like, oh, I have everything memorized. I can make things up as I go. It's better still for me to have bullet points of everything that they're going to encounter this session or possibly even the campaign, because I figured I have everything prepared. Now I can focus on actually the session, what's happening, how I can draw the drama, how I can draw the narrative. And my brain isn't focusing on generate quickly ideas. What does the cabinet look like? I'm not focusing on that. I don't care about that anymore, right? So the location and descriptions is essential for your game. The NPCs that they're going to talk to, right? Sheets and personalities optional, but at least have a names list. Have a list of names. You can generate this off fantasynames.org, I think is the website. There's a billion different websites for name generation. Have a list of names randomly generated for the character sheets. I'm pretty sure you've seen Matt Mercer, how he has an Excel sheet, where he marks names off. If they ask you, well, I want to talk to this random NPC that, you didn't even consider. He's just a random guy that's walking off the distance. Well, and you don't sit there like, oh, well, his name, give me a second. And I'm still guilty of this till today. But it's always better for your sakes to have that list handy. So, oh, well, you're talking to Dahlia. Nice. And then you cross off the name, and she works at the Broken Tooth Tavern, for example. Right? Oh, sorry. I think I pressed the wrong button. After that, it's just your events. What's going on this session? Now I have the locations and NPCs figured out. So events, what's going on? Last session, they talked to Martha at the Broken Tooth Tavern. Then they're going into the town, most likely. Okay, maybe the shops I have to generate a bit. Hey, maybe there's a combat encounter. Well, you have a subplot for wolves, or your main plot is, oh, the Pantheon Kingdom is invading or whatever, right? Prepare that combat encounter. How many monsters? What monsters are going to have? You can even do the quantities later. What are some interesting monsters you want to provide in this session? It could be as simple as that. A list of monsters. Hey, I want goblins. I want guardians. I want nettle beasts. Whatever, right? Puzzles and challenges. Again, this is also optional, but it's suggested. Like you don't want your session to all be combat talking. You want to have some interesting trips and tripes here, right? One of the core pillars of D&D since AD&D back in the 1980s is puzzles, right? You can do simple crossword puzzles, simple riddles. Riddles are the easiest ones. You can Google online a billion different riddles, and then your NPCs just blurt them out. And your characters, of course, they're not allowed to go on Google and cheat, and it's not fun to cheat anyways. But it's interesting, right? You create that indirect challenge for them rather than, oh, I have to fight you now. Oh no. And then Now, well, the players don't react like that. Players are always happy to fight, but you could get bored of it. So very optional, but it's very easy to set up. You don't have to go to advanced with this meticulous plan. Just simple puzzles here and there. I've had like to explain the best puzzle I've seen till today, and people will not expect this. In one of my campaigns that I've been playing for 2 years, we had our DM had a boss, but this boss is not a combative boss. No, he plays games of chance. So we played a game of poker for our lives, like quite literally. The 4 players got their decks out, and we started actually playing poker against them. And we had to beat him for like 3 hours. We played that. We had to beat him at poker to actually win that boss encounter and get the loot. And we didn't, no combat. It's just poker, and our souls are on the line. And that session till today is one of my favorite boss fights of all time because it was so unique and so interesting. And we got to do this interesting activity that is not just, the same old, right? So try to figure out interesting challenges that you want to include, maybe things that you've seen, use your real life practice, whatever you want. It's really up to you. The random events and encounters tables, you'll find a billion ones online, are very optional. So if you want to develop your story, again, if we're going back to story development or location development, there's always random events, random tables. They'll be like roll D100, and then roll D100, you'll land on 96, and then I'll be like, yes, forest, tree with web spider, etc., right? And so you can find them online if you really need them to help you. And there are some for events, festivals, weather, whatever, right? And then lastly, again, you've done your combat encounters, you've done your NPCs, your locations. Now we need to prepare the monsters. You need to get your monster sheet. The most important thing is your monster sheet. The art's optional. And the lore and background is it's nice to know what goblins do and how they focus because it'll build that narrative. But most importantly is have that monster sheet handy. Like prepare it before the session, right? What can the goblin do? He does 1d4 plus 3 damage with his dagger. He does 1d6 minus 1 with his shortbow, for example. And so once you have those ready, you take a lot of that load off you. So all you need to do in combat is, all right, Sarah, it's your session. It's your turn, sorry. What do you do? Okay, you hit him. He has, and then you have the character sheet ready. Oh, he has 14 AC. Cool. Okay, you hit him. You do this much damage. You don't tell them the HP. In D&D, nobody tells the HP. Wink, wink. So it's up to you how you do combat. You want to show them the HP. Most people don't, but you can if you want to. And then you can kind of keep track of them on the sheets themselves. And the sheets will always be helpful reference. Like you can have the monster manual if you want, always ready on your table. I personally have 5e tools, and then I just search the name of the monster during the session, right? And lastly, and most importantly, for your own session, is bring your own magic. This is the most important. Again, we go back to the mental part, right? It needs a lot of preparation here and there, right? All that doesn't matter if you are not motivated, if you don't have the energy, if you have the best module in your hands and everything, the best maps, the best monster designs, the best players of all time. If you don't have that excitement to play the game, to run the NPCs, to challenge yourself, to challenge the players, to be evil, to be good, to be whatever, right? Your session's not going to be fun. You need to bring your own excitement, your own magic. And I go further to this and say, D&D again, there's no one right way to do it. Bring your own skill set. I am a management consultant, right? I work in customer experience for Abu Dhabi government, from Dubai government sometimes. And so what I do is sometimes I will look at the player's journey, right? Customer journey, we call it, right? Like what are the players feeling right now? What do they specifically need? That's my skill set, empathy maps, whatever you want to call it. And so I see during the session, what do my players need? Or last session, I felt like they were a bit bored. So every session I try to meet their need, right? But you don't have to do it. Maybe you're an engineer and hey, well, you have an interesting skill set here. Puzzles, maybe like physics, whatever. Like it's really up to you. Doctors, there's always interesting things to do there, right? Whatever your job is, whatever your lifestyle is, there's something interesting for you to bring, something unique you only have to bring to the table. You just have to realize it because D&D is just, it's fantastic. There's so many ways to play it, so many ways to run it. There's no right way, no right rule set. Again, up to you. I think for the most part, that's really what you need to prepare your session. So if you have a module, you have the world set up, you have the story set up, you have at least the basics of a short campaign, a one-shot setup, right? All you need is these 6 things. and your energy, you're good to go. Your first time is going to be scary, it's going to be rough, but everyone's was, right? Don't put that much pressure on yourself. It's going to be scary only the first like 5 minutes. And then you get so into the story that you forget time even passed, right? And I like to call this the three C's of DMing, right? You need consistency, confidence, and communication. These are your three most important things. Consistency, make sure you're showing up on time, you are running your sessions on time, finishing them on time. You say we're going to start at 4, know that you're going to start at 4:30, not 4, but you as a DM outsmart your players. You tell them 4, but you're actually starting at 4:30 and you finish at 8:30, right? So be consistent in your preparation. If you can, I find the best practice for consistency is set a time during your week, 2 hours, 3 hours, every 2 days, do some D&D prep. And maybe once per day. Maybe like before the session, if you really want to stress yourself, it's stressful to do it on the same day as the session. I wouldn't suggest it, but you're forced to sometimes. So try to be as consistent. And I didn't put that here, but committed, right? Commitment is a given. If you're joining a D&D campaign, you're in for commitment, right? It can go from 3 months to 2 years. So be consistent, be committed. Even if you're not excited, try to force it. Try your best. You as the DM, if you have to be kind of a role model, again, you're the daddy of your party. You have to be that role model for them. Show up on time, um, be attentive, communicative with your players. Be confident. Don't worry. It's just a game. So what? You screwed up. Who cares? Are you being paid for this? I'm not being paid for that. I don't care. I'm coming here for fun, man. I got a 9 to 5 job on Monday. All right. And everybody knows this. Everybody in the table knows this. You're not the only one. Everybody is coming here for fun. You screw up. You say, guys, sorry, I just screwed up. Can I get 5 minutes to just look at my notes? Say you screwed up in a combat. Can I get 15 minutes to check my map? You're human. You're supposed to have fun. Always tell yourself, what if? Okay, if you failed, if you bombed, if you say, and you can't bring it out. So, who cares? Who cares? The players are going to come back next week. When is the next session? That's what they're going to say to you. I promise you. Their DMs are so rare and so few that players are excited to grab their hands on every DM they can find. And this is globally. This is not just in Abu Dhabi. This is or UAE in general. This is globally. Wherever you go, there's just one DM for every 20 players. So you and your DMing know that. It's just a game. Have fun. Continue it. One sentence to the next. One scene to the next. One NPC to the next. Have fun with it. Maybe you had a plot line that you've planned out today. I don't like it. I want to change it up. Change it up. Who cares? Just be confident in yourself. Know that it's okay. Make the mistake. Communicate it to your players, man. Be confident to communicate. Communication is confidence, right? In the end of the day, communicate your needs. Communicate, guys. I didn't prepare a lot today. Our session, I know, is supposed to start at 4:30, and I know you're here at 4:30, but I really didn't have enough time to prepare a lot, and I didn't want to leave this session this week. Can you give me 1 hour to do some preparations? Why not, guys? Why not? There's no problems. If players are going to be excited, and if they're not, well, tough luck. I don't have anything, so what are we going to do? Most players are going to be supportive because they want to play in the end of the day. And then lastly is communication, right? The most important aspect of D&D. D&D is all communication. We don't have any actual controllers. We don't have any screens. We don't have a GTX 480 graphics card. No. It's just me and you talking, sitting and talking. I'm telling you what you're seeing. You're telling me what you're doing. D&D is entirely communication on and off the table. Know this. Again, when you're managing your party as players, it's off the table. When you're managing the party inside the game, it's on the table, right? This is the terms at least I've heard used and I've used personally. So communication on and off the table. Most important thing. Try to make it as clear as possible. Too much of it is better than too little. Over communicating something is better than not communicating it at all. and you will build your party as you go. Even if, and the best parties, the easiest way to start D&D is doing it with a bunch of friends that you've known and play other things with. But if you don't have that opportunity, well, fine, make your own group and let's see how we can become friends off the table, right? That's the fun thing about D&D. You can make new friends, make new networks. God knows, meet some guy in the police station. He's interested in fantasy, and then he writes you off a fine. You don't know. I don't know. But yeah, it's all communication. Make sure that you don't have that ego where you're always right. No, it's just me and you trying to really work together and have this amazing scene, this amazing series. You can play D&D as an anime, for God's sake. Like, if you really love anime, you can play D&D as an anime. There are people who actually have anime settings on Google. You can research, find it, use it, whole modules. Do it, communicate it, find a way. It's up to you, right? I think last one I had was pretty much my favorite tools. Kind of going through the basics in 1 hour 15 minutes, almost 1 hour 30 minutes. My favorite tools to use. So ChatGPT, again, game breaker, came out like ever since it came out. Especially if you have ChatGPT 4.0. Again, people will be like, oh well, I don't want to steal art. I don't want to. If that's you, cool, man. If you want to do that manual prep, go for it. I have nothing against you. You can go to Dungeon Masters Guild. It's a third-party supplements website. If you go to their website, dungeonmastersguild.com, I believe, or .net, they have all the resources. It's like a marketplace for all the resources you can ever want for D&D, and some of them are free even, and some of them are for like $2-3. Some of them are for $5. But ChatGPT is my go-to. I use ChatGPT exclusively to do most of my prep nowadays, right? And when it comes to like the actual, like what I find boring is the narrative, like descriptions. I kind of get bored. Like me personally, I get bored sitting there and trying to I like to develop the story and where the story flow is going. I don't really like to sit down and do the homework of writing the mechanics and the rules. And some people like that. Cool. I don't. So what I do is I'll go to GPT and I'll give it, this is what I want. Can you give it to me? And it will do an amazing job. It will give you entire monster sheets. It will give you entire combat encounters, entire puzzles. Hell, if you want loot tables, description tables, cities, towns, it can give you everything. Don't shy out of using it. All right. These tools, again, maybe a bit advanced over what I've described. If you're comfortable with ChatGPT, you can learn how to use it. You can ignore it. But this is at least what I use it for. I use it even to generate combats, to sometimes to do art styles, right? If you've generated a character, you can always generate an art style of ChatGPT because you have DALL-E now. Reddit is by far, if you're doing modules especially, is a very important tool because Reddit has subreddits for maps. So if you like maps are not hard to do, by the way. If anyone's anxious about battle maps, you really like battle maps, you want to do battle maps, and it's easier because if you're doing combat of theater of the mind, you're every time the player's gonna, where am I from the monster? Well, you're 30 feet and you're having to imagine it. You want to do a map. It's easier, but it can be a little bit anxiety driving because you don't have every map prepared. Don't worry, you can get 1 or 2 generic maps. You can draw maps. Back in the day, we used to have Fantasy Grounds, Alpha. We used to draw trees with pencil, and it was fun. It was really fun back then because, we have that descriptive narrative, and if you develop that theory of the mind, you're all having fun as a party. And so if you want maps, you can go to Reddit. Reddit has world maps, battle maps, extra assets for you to use, extra tools, weapons, cool storylines. Even if you're running a module like Curse of Strahd, for example, I exclusively ran Curse of Strahd with the reworked version on Reddit. There's a Curse of Strahd Reddit. It has a reworked version of Curse of Strahd, which is kind of like building on the module, like the characters in the story a little bit more. It gives you a little bit more items, a little bit more interesting plot lines, side quests. And so I used it from Reddit. I used entirely Reddit resources. Sometimes they'll have like letters from the modules, like actual letters you could print out on a physical notation, magic items, interesting things, right? People share everything in Reddit. Again, 5e tools, the most important tool I use in my day. Free, go on it. Everything's there. Everything. Whatever you need. And lastly, this is a tool you can use OneDrive. You don't really need to pay. So I use LoreMaster.io. It's basically for my campaign notes. Always try to use the. Of course, players need to have notes, but we'll talk about that another day. But you as the DM need to have notes. Like there's no running a session off the back of your head. Even the best DMs who can make shit up as they go cannot do that, right? They need at least 3-4 bullet points, and they need to keep track of these 3-4 bullet points over the span of the campaign. And so you need something that's easily available for you. You can do it on a notebook, you can do it on the cloud, you can do it on OneNote, on your phone, whatever you want, right? This is just the tool I use, at least, is Lore Master IO, because it's the one that's D&D driven and was kind of cool in terms of UX, right? All right, I think that's really it from my side.